afternoon, everybody. This is New Jersey Garden, Zone 6A in New Jersey. I'm going to do a garden tour, and the tour is starting off by showing my little vegetable garden here. I definitely need to do a bit of weeding this weekend, but last year this garden was a cut flower bed, and I still have some flowers in here that were from last year. I just didn't want to take them out, but I have some bachelor buttons blowing in the wind over here. And this is where I had planted, and it looks like one of them fell down, but this is where I had planted strawberries, bok choy from seeds, a few tomato plants, and some cucumbers. So I'm in the process of staking the cucumbers and doing the trellising for the cucumbers, and I'll show you guys how I trellis the cucumbers and how I stake the tomatoes. I just use basic stakes I got from Home Depot or Lowe's, and I can show you more videos on how I prune the tomato plants. But the cucumbers, I use twine. I use stakes and twine, and that allows the vines to grow up. I'm also growing some squash that's in the back there. I don't know if you can see that. There's some acorn squash and some spaghetti squash back there. So this whole garden needs to be weeded. So I'll show another separate vegetable garden video once it's weeded and once I have the trellising set up. But I just wanted to show you this is my setup. Now I have some sunflowers here in the back also from last year. The fencing. So I don't have money for like a really nice fence, and I didn't use a raised bed. I'm just trying to grow some vegetables right in the ground here. So this is a little shed that we have on the property. So I put these fiberglass stakes in the ground and hammered them in, and then I have this 30-pound monofilament fishing line that goes every few, I would say like every 1.5 feet, that's tied to each post. And it's a little, I may need to fix some of the, make it more taut. But basically the deer, we have a big deer problem here, and the deer will not go into this fencing. They will get spooked. If they don't know what they're jumping over, they won't jump over it. So this is like my makeshift deer-proof garden here with this fishing line. So it worked last year, and so far it's working this year. So, but I'll keep you posted on this vegetable garden. Let's do a flower garden tour right now. So this garden bed is facing west, and it has a lot of California poppies, and I should do another video when they're actually in bloom. It's the evening now, so they've all closed up, but they're beautiful orange flowers, and they really bloom almost all summer long. And back here are the peonies that just finished blooming. I did a video on the peonies recently. And in this bed, I just basically have the peonies, and I had some daffodils that I have to clean up there, and all these California poppies. But they're really interesting plants. They do close up at night, but they look like this. Just trying to do a close-up. And they've got such a pretty color to them. So this garden bed is right in front of the house, and this is the lilac, and I had just pruned it out. I basically just took I clipped out all of the spent blooms, and I trimmed off some of the top because it was getting a little tall. So I just trimmed it up, and right next to it is a knockout rose, and this comes in like a dark, like a deep hot pink, which I think is even nicer, but this pink is very pretty as well, and it was covered with blooms last week. And what I do is I prune it in another week or so, and I get another flush of blooms in the summer. Down here, there's actually a couple of sunflowers that just kind of volunteered themselves, so I may not move them. I have a lot of lilies that are just opening up. I have a lot of daylilies. I have 2 types of daylilies. I have Stella D'Oro, which is like an orangey yellow color. It's a pretty commonly found in garden centers. And then I have Happy Returns, which is more of a yellow color. So I think this one here might be the Happy Returns. Just some frog garden decor. Down here, these are Asiatic lilies, and they're pink, and I'll show those when they're in bloom. And here are some daylilies that are starting to open up. These ones are the Stella d'Oro daylilies. Over here, these plants are an herb. It's called anise hyssop, or you can also see it as lavender hyssop. They really attract a lot of bumblebees, so I decided to grow it this year. I usually find it in the garden, and it was just getting all over the place, spreading all over the place. So I was pulling it up initially, but the last couple years I've missed it, so I decided to just let it grow this year. And it will have like a purple flower, light purple flower. In this garden bed I have more lilies, and what I decided to do is I planted a lot of zinnias in this garden bed this year, and I will be thinning them out, but you can see that I had planted zinnias recently, and I love zinnias. They will grow really well here, and they'll be blooming in August and September. So all these little patches here are the zinnias. And then I have some morning glory with some trellising here to support it. I love morning glory, and I believe this variety is Grandpa Ott, which is a purple variety. And then in front of it I have ageratum growing, which is a purple annual that drops its seed every year. So I get ageratum every year, even though it is an annual. And the same thing with the morning glory. It comes back every year right here in the spot. And there's some more lilies. These ones are, I think, the oriental lilies. And then this lily is really pretty. I'll show that when it's in bloom. The deer love this one. I have to spray all my lilies with deer repellent. I use something called Deer Stopper. It's in a red bottle, and it's on Amazon and in some garden centers near us. I believe it's made in New Jersey. It just works better than other deer repellents that I've used. So I do spray my plants like once a week when I remember to, for the deer. Over here, these plants in the back are actually a brown-eyed Susan. And I don't remember planting them here. I think they just came over here from the wind or birds or something, and I may be moving them. But in front of that are lilies, and they haven't come into bloom yet. And we have these, I believe they're juniper bushes, and right here is a flower I really love, and I don't have enough of it. It's sort of petered out, but this is a perennial verbena, and it's Verbena rigida, R-I-G-I-D-A, and it will bloom for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it really loves hot spots and dry spots in the garden. So this garden bed wraps in front of the house towards the street, and I have a lot that's blooming right now. So we'll start with this first one. This is a perennial called Maltese Cross. I grew this from seed, and it's just coming into bloom now, and it has a really interesting red flower. Hummingbirds like this plant, and I love it because I haven't seen any pests bothering this plant. It can grow even taller. Right now it's about 3.5 feet tall, but I've seen it grow closer to 4 feet tall. It's just a really interesting flower. And then down here I have some yarrow that hasn't bloomed yet, and a Princess Victoria Louise poppy. A lot of my poppies just finished blooming, and when they finish blooming they leave these really interesting seed pods. Down here is a lady's mantle. Lady's mantle grows great with a lot of different plants, and it can grow really well in the shade as well. And it looks great after the rain. The raindrops just stay on the plant. Down here is a catmint. And then right here I have a bigger catmint. This is called Walker's Low. Now, catmint is a pretty sturdy plant. It's very tough, and it does attract bumblebees, which I like. And what I like about it is I use it sometimes to prop up other flowers that might flop. So for example, I have some Shasta daisies right in front, and sometimes those flop over. So I put the catmint right behind the daisies as a way to prop up the daisies. I've just saw a bumblebee. There it is. There's a bumblebee on the catmint. There's some more lady's mantle, some poppies, and then this is lavender. This is just coming into bloom now. I wish I knew the variety. I believe it's an English lavender. There's more lady's mantle. This flower down here is a coreopsis. The low growing, the ground cover there is called soapwort that just finished blooming. Then I have a lot of Shasta daisies in this bed that will be blooming in the next, probably the next 3 weeks or so. This is just a poppy. There's a lot of browning that goes on with the leaves once it's finished. So I can cut that back down to the ground. These poppies are perennial poppies. They're a mixture of oriental poppies and the Princess Victoria Louise poppies. And these are all the seed pods from the poppies. And there's some daisies. These tall lilies here are oriental lilies. Not in bloom yet. And there's another lady's mantle. I do like lady's mantle because it just blends well with other plants in the garden. Just more poppies. There's another Princess Victoria Louise. And this year in the basement, in the winter, I started some seeds. And some of those seeds were Shirley poppies. So those are right over here. And they should be blooming hopefully in the next week. I'm excited to see what those look like. It does look like there's been some little black spots on the leaves, but the flowers hopefully aren't affected by that. And there's another catmint, Walker's Low. Then I have a lot of brown-eyed Susan in this garden bed, and it's actually a biennial, so the mother plant died and then left little babies, and then this year those little baby plants are going to grow. So I had a lot of little black-eyed Susan plants last year, and they're actually now big plants. So I'll have a lot of brown-eyed Susans. I'll have a lot of brown-eyed Susans this year. There's another brown-eyed Susan. They look a little bit like the coneflower plant, so I get a little mixed up sometimes, but it's brown-eyed Susan. And there's some more of the Maltese Cross, just not bloomed yet. So there's more brown-eyed Susan. I grow a lot of liatris. Liatris is grown from bulbs, but then you can get a lot of seedlings. Like if you just let your liatris seeds fall to the ground, you get a lot of little seedlings. So I have a lot of liatris in this garden bed, and I love it because, again, it's not affected by the deer and pests don't seem to bother it. Then I have another lily here with more liatris, just not in bloom. I'll do another garden tour in a couple weeks when more things are in bloom. I had a little bit of this brown-eyed Susan nibbled on by the deer already. This is just a lilac. This is a third lilac that I showed in another video. It's doing okay. Hopefully it will bloom next year. Just a lot of brown-eyed Susan. I may thin out the brown-eyed Susan. I have quite a lot of it, and it does get really big, so I might thin it out. And then down here I have one of my favorite plants, which is called blanket flower. And I grew this from seed, and if you were watching my videos last year, I ended up throwing out or removing a lot of my blanket flower because they got diseased. They got these white spots on them. And I even see little white spots on this one, so I don't know if this one's staying or not, but I need to grow some more blanket flower because it will bloom all summer long. It blooms from now until like November. It's really great for bloom time. And it's drought tolerant and the deer do not touch it. It's also called Gaillardia. And then this is just more liatris. This tree just showed up in the garden in another spot in the garden and I just stuck it here. I may be moving it before it gets too big. We just put Christmas lights on it and use it for that, but it's sort of sticking out here a little bit too close to the street. I'm in the street right now. So then we have more yarrow, which I love, and I can't wait to show you the yarrow. There's liatris and some daylilies. Here's some yarrow that just started to bloom. I have a lot of peach and red and purple tones. And some yellow and gold. Yarrow does great in clay soil, and we have clay soil here. It's a very easy plant to grow, so if you're a beginner gardener, I would recommend trying to grow yarrow. It's really easy to grow. And then down here I have just a coreopsis. Over here is our mailbox. There's some mail there on the ground, but this plant is a clematis, and I'm surprised it hasn't started blooming yet, but we will have a lot of blooms on this plant. But I normally don't prune the clematis, I just let it go. And we had, like I said, a really rough winter and we lost a lot of plants this winter. So during the winter, the mailbox was replaced and I thought I had lost this clematis. But it started over again from the ground, and it looks like it's going to have some bloom soon. So I'm excited about that. This is just more liatris with peonies, and I did a video on all my peonies. They're just finishing their bloom now, so I'll cut off all these spent blooms, all the seed pods. And I have 8 peony plants in this garden bed right here. There's just a little lady's mantle here. And then this tree, I showed this in another video. This is just a dogwood tree. It's a red dogwood. And we had lost a branch or two during some winter storms, so it's a little lopsided, but that's what a dogwood tree looks like. And then over here I had lost a bunch of plants this winter. I think it just was a really harsh winter. So I had a lot of alyssum in this garden bed along with some other plants, and we actually just mulched, so a lot of the little annual seedlings got covered over. So I may be planting more in this bed, but this is just a coneflower, and the deer nibbled on it already. I sprayed it tonight, but that's a coneflower. And on the ground here, it looks like those are deer markings. Right here, this is one of my favorite plants. We used to have a lot more of it. It's called Jupiter's Beard, and it has a very lovely reddish pink flower. And then over here, I have to do a little weeding. But this is a ground cover called perennial phlox. There's a lot of weeds. But this had like a really nice pink flower, and it blooms for a really long time, like 8 or 9 weeks. So I'm hoping this spreads out in this area. So that is it for the garden tour. And I will be doing more garden tours in the coming weeks. And I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I just want to say thank you to all my subscribers And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and like this video. And thank you so much for your support. Have